continue this conversation with Senator Maria Cantwell, a Democrat representing the state of Washington. She is the ranking member of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. Senator, thank you for joining us. So you have received briefings from the NTSB and the FAA. What have you learned from them?
Well, data is starting to flow in, but it's most important to give the NTSB the time to do the investigation. Ultimately, the NTSB will find the facts that right now people can have conjecture about, but so important to let them get that information because ultimately the facts will lead us to the changes we need to see.
But can you confirm any of the information that's out there based on the briefings you've received about the Black Hawk helicopter and that it may have veered off its flight path and been at a higher altitude than it should have been?
Well, I represent a big aviation state. You know, the Seattle Times is a Pulitzer Award-winning newspaper on aviation, so a lot of experts and a lot of people giving them data and information. So there's a lot online that suggests that it was at the wrong altitude. I think the president may have even said something this morning confirming that it was at an altitude that people didn't expect it to be at. But let's get the data from the NTSB. They have the black box, as your reporter just said. It will take them some time to analyze it. Yes, they might be able to play it today, but the point is they're trying to piece together so that we get to the real facts of a situation. And that's what I think is so important, because every aviation change that we need to make needs to be based on the real facts.
I want to go back to that video we've been showing that CNN has obtained, and it shows the moments, if we can just show that here, it shows the moments just before the midair collision. And, you know, you watch that video, and hopefully, again, we can pull it up. But it does raise questions about the Black Hawk helicopter and whether it was focused on the wrong plane. Here it is right here. You can see this video from a different angle. And there it happens. And it's just so hard to even watch that, because we do have to remember, as we talk about the investigation, 67 lives lost. But what questions does that raise for you? And do you know from the briefings you've gotten, have you learned anything about the helicopter pilots in terms of where they were in their training? Because experts I've been speaking to are asking, could it have been an issue of fatigue? Were they done with their training? They were heading back. Was fatigue an issue?
Well, Pamela, first let me express my condolences to all the families. These are such horrific events, and they take devastating tolls on people's families that they may never recover from. And so the best thing we can do for them is get them answers. And so what the video shows is that they were flying at the same altitude at a moment when that shouldn't have happened, that somewhere in the process of what is now established as these two routes, which I think will raise a lot of questions for lawmakers to discuss. How are those two routes, and even the level of separation that is expected? How are we even doing that? But so I think we'll get an answer from NTSB. But from appearances, it looked like they were at the same altitude.
Do you think helicopters should be flying there near the airport in that busy airspace?
I think that we have to ask a question: what kind of oversight do we have of a plan that allows maybe a cap at 200 feet and a flight coming in on that runway 33? Is that even enough to have separation? Is that enough separation? So if the pilot just deviated by 100 feet, was that enough separation? So all these are things we're going to have to get from the NTSB and be, you know, I know it's hard to wait for that, but Jennifer Hamady is an excellent administrator. I think she's spending her time today briefing the families, which I think people forget. That's an also very hard part of this.
100%, yeah.
The administrator, we had a seaplane accident out in the Northwest, and she personally came and took over the investigation. And you have to be able to communicate to the press, but you have to also communicate to the families, and they want answers too.
Of course. Just to follow up on that, though, because Renee just talked about the near collision the day before between an airplane and a helicopter. Should airplanes be flying in that crowded airspace near DCA, particularly at night where there are just more complexities?
I think there has to be a review of this policy. And how did we get to this point? Obviously, our airspace here with a military presence, and my sense is movement of dignitaries in and out of DC. What is the right level of interface between those two entities, the FAA and DOD? And we need to get clarity on this.
Right. Yeah. So the helicopters and whether they should still be flying in that airspace at night, I think that's continuing continuing piece of scrutiny after this collision. Something else that is under scrutiny is this bill that you supported. It was a bipartisan group of senators supporting more flights being added, more long distance flights, 5 being added. As you well know, some of your fellow colleagues, Senator King, Senator Warner, Senator Van Hollen, they were against it. They said, look, this airspace is way too crowded. It's too complex. DCA is already maxed out. It's supposed to take 15 million flights. It's now 25 million, and we're adding more. Was that the wrong move in hindsight following this collision, which, by the way, we don't know if it played a role with this, but does it raise questions for you?
Well, the FAA has the ultimate authority to always monitor the flight paths and systems and say what is safe and what is operational. That rests with the FAA administrator. I hope we will get an FAA administrator very soon, because I thought Mike Whitaker was doing a good job at trying to address our safety issues, and now we don't have an administrator. But I think all of this will be discussed, because the question is, how do you build capacity? There's a lot of members who don't like the perimeter rule, that is, that we're allowing a lot of short flights from various places into DCA. So I guarantee you, out of 100 members of the United States Senate, they all have an opinion. They're just not the same opinion. So I think what you have to do in any instance, you need a continuous safety improvement regime. We're fighting for that. That bill gave us more air traffic controllers. It funded the NTSB when people didn't want to reauthorize and fund it. They're the North Star. Whatever they say, that's what we should do. Unfortunately, the FAA needs to be a more aggressive oversight agency. And in this case, what did the FAA think of this inter-flight pattern between DOD and the air traffic controllers management at the airport? And what else were they dealing with? What else were the air traffic controllers dealing with? So after the Challenger explosion, we put a bigger safety office at NASA, and it may be that there's a need for a bigger safety office at the FAA to monitor these airport issues and give us an understanding of whether they think that they have the capacity to deal with this or they don't. But ultimately, it's the FAA administrator's determination. Does that airport have a problem? Does it need to change?
Really quickly, I want to get your response to President Trump baselessly blaming DEI and Democrats on this collision.
Well, I think he was off base. The standards for air traffic controllers haven't changed. So they're the same standards, and people have to meet them or you don't get the job. What is a problem is that we haven't had enough air traffic controllers. So you have been stretching the people that do work there, sometimes making them work 6 days in a row. We fought to improve by adding 3,000 new air traffic controllers. So we don't want to cut back on air traffic controllers. We want to have more. We want them to have enough rest. And we want to make sure that the FAA does its oversight job of the airspace and air traffic controllers. And do we have what it takes to monitor any situation?
And as we know, our reporting from Pete Montine is that the air traffic controller on duty was doing the job of 2, covering both helicopters and the planes at the time of this collision, even though that's not uncommon, apparently, according to experts.
Well, I don't know, and I'm like you. I know we've had some briefing yesterday by NTSB, and they'll keep us up to speed. I know Chairman Cruz is planning to have a member meeting with NTSB probably next week or early next week, and so we'll get some more information there. But yes, that question of what is the standard practice for staffing, and if they moved it by an hour, which it sounds like they did, if they basically said, as traffic slowed down, did they release people from having 2 different systems in place at the same time? All of this is the oversight role we are supposed to play, but the bottom line is the FAA has to be more aggressive, particularly in an era of new technology. They have to be more aggressive about monitoring all of this and not just letting, if your incident showed that there was a go-around yesterday or maybe 2 weeks ago, or I've even been on a go-around at National.
Me too.
So we have said to the NTSB, you publish the trend report. You publish the safety trend report. Why? Because we believe you. Why? Because you have to investigate accidents. Why? Because you have to listen to those tapes over and over again, the last minutes of someone's life. So listen to what the NTSB says. And if they say that is not enough staffing or that's not enough flow, then fix the problem.
All right, Senator Maria Cantwell, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.